You're watching the Lemon Narrative with Sabreen podcast. I am Sabreen, your host. I am a writer and a storyteller, and I meet people to learn about the human experience. And I usually ask them the question, what would you tell me if I'm writing a feature film about you? Today with me is Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hey, how
I'm
you
so
doing?
honored to have you today. So I'll let
It's
him
so fun to
introduce
be
himself.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Rob,
yeah.
tell us about yourself. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real beautiful, wonderful experience. Well, my name is Rob. I am originally from Holland. I'm Dutch. I live in the United States since 2019. By profession, I'm a brand designer, strategist, designer. I don't even know what titles to use anymore, but I help people build their brands and put them out on social media, on the internet. And I help with that whole process. And like I said, I have lived here since 2019. My in-laws, they own a farmed animal sanctuary, so they rescue like cows and pigs and turkeys from the industry, and they give them like a forever home. So that's kind of like my reality here, my setting. And like most days, I spend pretty much in either in the office or in the backyard with the little doggy, Harry, the
Here.
corgi. Yeah. And I sit here in my office and I work. I talk to people, clients. I work on projects. I do webinars and workshops. So that's kind of like who I am and what I do on a daily basis.
That's so cool. Living in a farm and then doing all the work on your computer. I lived in a farm once, but it was an industrial farm, chicken
Mm-mm.
farm. My dad
Yeah.
is a vet, and that
Mhm.
was in Yemen. An
Uh-huh.
interesting time. Maybe one day we'll talk about it. But
Yeah.
today I'm going to ask you the first question.
Yeah.
What would be the opening scene of your movie?
Oh, that's such a
Looking at
great.
your life, so
That's a
far.
great question. So, a movie about my life, you mean? And what would be the opening
Yeah.
scene? Oh gosh,
Yeah,
that's a
it's your
great
human
question.
experience. And okay, think about film you watch. You watch a film you like and it start by the end or like the middle of the plot where like everything is just going down, or sometimes it start by giving a birth to a child and we follow his life. Like The Curse of Benjamin Button. I don't remember the whole movie film, but I love that film. It's one of my favorites. Start by giving birth, or like it was the clock scene, and then because it goes reverse in time, right?
Hmm.
So,
Well, I
what's your
mean, I
opening?
just actually just only an hour before we sit down to do this, I
Mm-hmm.
have like thought about this deeply or a little more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of opening scene, right? Movie of my life sounds a little big, but I'll play along, and I love the idea. But
Okay.
it's so for myself, and what you mentioned already, like, is it like the moment you were born, right? Is that the beginning of your life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for myself, I have this feeling that I was like born a second time. That's what I feel in my life. And it was a very clear sort of demarcation. Like there was a very clear moment when that happened. And that's pretty much when I sort of moved from Holland, where I was born and lived for the first 17, 18, 19 years. And I made a move to India, but gradually, right? I first
Mm-hmm.
visited and then I stayed longer each time I visited. And then I ended up spending there maybe 10 or so years. But that
Mm-hmm.
moment when I felt like, wow, this is a completely like the permanent change of life. First, it's kind of like just tasting a little bit of the experience. But now I'm like, I really live in India. This is where I live. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here on the bank, right? There's a high the bank. I'm looking down. There's the holy river. There's all sorts of things going on. There's like flowers, floating in that river. And you can see the sun is kind of like going down maybe 4 or 5 p.m. and it's all very smoky because a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
they use like smoke, like open fire to cook or to heat the, for heat, and so you have that smoky. So it's quite mystical, and you hear
Mm-hmm.
church like temple bells in the background and prayers and all that. And I'm here, and I'm like, oh my god, like literally, oh my god, like this is my new life. So if you ask me, like what kind of opening scene, that would be the opening scene of my life because I feel like a lot of who I am was shaped there,
Mm-hmm.
came
How
into like
old?
that made me. I feel.
How old were you?
So I was 19 at this time.
19. Do you feel there's a connection between your life in India and Holland? When I move from one place to another, I see the connections between the two different environments or the two different countries. Or like I'll see someone, it's not like they remind me of someone. No.
Mm.
It's like I as if this is the person who I've met there, but this is who they are here. Does that make sense? I feel like it
Well, I
doesn't.
mean, to say like, I feel that in a sense, like
Mm,
life in India and life in Holland or in the US where I am right now and other places I lived,
mm,
is definitely very different because your daily activities are different. Your reflections and the people you meet and the activities that you do are different. Like being in Holland, it's mostly about being productive, paying rent. And I mean, that's pretty much most people's lives.
mm-hmm,
And so in India, or like in a more sort of holy setting, it was also a holy place where I was staying. And it
mm,
was also there for like spiritual reasons. So the whole life purpose and everything has a different focus and everything is aligned, in a different way. It's pointing in a different direction than when you're in the West, usually
mm,
being like, doing the, what do you call it? The treadmill. You know what I mean? Just keep going. It's like laundry. It never finishes, right? It's like an infinite
yeah.
eight.
Yes.
So but I did consciously escape that rat race.
Mm,
I did consciously get out of that because I did not want to be like that I saw my friends signing up for like a big mortgage and pretty much signing their freedom away. Like, and for me, freedom was a big motivating word that kind of like acted as an inner compass. I was always
okay.
in search of freedom or being unshackled or unchained. That was a
What
big one.
triggered that? The search of freedom. Since you're a child, you just wanted to be free? Or there's a moment?
There is a moment. It's actually a very interesting story.
I would love to
And I
hear
was
it.
15. I was 15, and a friend of my dad's, his name was Bill.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived in Spain, but the house that my dad and myself lived in was his house, or he had sold it and moved to Spain. Then he would come every now and then to come and visit, take care of some business paperwork. But
Mm,
my dad said, he's also like into spirituality because he was finding out that I was getting into spiritual things like meditation and reading
mm,
about Buddha and all that sort of things. And so, we met, we hung out. I mean, I knew him. And so he said, you want me to read your palm and tell you a couple of things about your future and do your like numerology? I was like, I don't even really know if I believe in that stuff. I mean, it's not that I'm skeptical necessarily or like, cynical, but I'm just like, well, whatever. I mean, to me, I'm like, I have both feet on the ground. So if you want to
mm,
read my numbers, what could go wrong, right? Like for me, I have no fear in that sense. So he did that, and he looked at my palm and he studied the lines, and then he looked up and then he said, like, you have a big destiny ahead of you. He says, and your numbers come up to number 5, and that stands for freedom. And in this year of your life, you'll be making some very important decisions, like in pursuit of that freedom.
mm.
So that he told me and that kind of resonated with me. It didn't really surprise me, but it was also something that I was kind of like, it's just a word. Like it's just whatever he says, right? It comes from his mind. It's his idea. Like it doesn't have to have any effect on me and my life. But that word freedom and also the number 5, but more the word freedom, it's somehow like stuck in my psyche. And so because, and subconsciously or unconsciously, it started to become a factor in like my decision making. Like you do certain things and will that bring me freedom or less, more or less freedom?
Mm,
So that I think is when the seed was planted.
the word.
And and I didn't realize it at that time. It was just a word. And I like freedom. I like free spirited, right? I like to be like liberated. I like an artist or a dancer or somebody to be uninhibited and to like freely express themselves, like that sort of freedom, like
Mm,
for myself, or to live life on your own terms, like to not be dependent or like dictated by others, but merely by my own sort of like heart, or like that sort of freedom. So
the
his words,
freedom
yeah,
with no framework.
no framework at all, exactly, but also
Yeah.
no fear. Yeah, so that there was a kind
No
of like
fear.
there's something came with that freedom. It was not
What?
just freedom, but it was also responsibility.
Mm,
Because you don't lean on anything because you're free. So when you don't lean, then you have to lean on you. Like
Yes.
I have to be fully responsible for everything, right? And to
Yes.
own that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
What were you fearing? Is there
fearing,
anything you were fearing at that time? Because you
I
said
think what,
freedom and no fear.
yeah, what I was fearing, I think, was boredom, or was like just plainness,
Mm,
like some of my friends would sign their lives away by, signing up for a mortgage, like straight, or going like straight to university. And I wanted to take a year off
mm,
and, after school. And so that I had that fear that I was going to get, have a boring life
mm,
and be stuck forever in this, like, picket fence and like dog and tree. And so that was not and I got that from my dad, and his family were also quite international,
mm,
living all over the, globe.
mhm.
So but these dots that I'm connecting now, like that wasn't always as obvious to me that
At that
that's how my
time.
life. No, at the
Yeah.
time it was just like, okay, you just roll with the punches, or you just go with whatever life presents and you try to make the best of it.
Mm,
Yeah. So, but I have my own story, of course, also how that was tested, or how that, like, cause being free is also like, oh, so you don't want to commit. Why? So you don't want to like be, like, committed to a job for too long, or, so because if I would have, maybe I would have had a completely different future and a different
yes.
outcome, and maybe, you know, and so with the freedom is also like, yeah, I traveled everywhere out of a suitcase, but then you all of a sudden you're like 35 or 40, and you're like, oh, wait, all my friends, they have like houses,
Families.
family,
I know.
Here
I
I
know.
am, the eternal, free bird.
But alone.
Yeah, but
I can relate to this a lot.
yeah.
Because I had this, I don't know if it would be called, if I called it freedom. For me it was, I just wondered, why wouldn't people get bored with the things they want in life? Because I get bored so easily,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And I remember something, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but like, it was the idea, because I come, from a community where you get married at your 20s, you're expired by your 30s, right?
uh, uh-huh,
And 30 is the dreadful age. It's like the
mm,
end line. You're 30, you didn't get, oh my gosh. And because my parents were separated, and I was like 9 or younger, and I was like, no. In my 20s, I just want to live my life. I don't care what kind of life. I just want to live it and experience it,
mhm,
and
mhm,
and I whenever like we, girls talk and romance and stuff, and I'm like, I
mhm.
would just keep quiet, you know, because I feel like I'm weird. That's how
Yeah.
I felt. I felt like, and a lot of things were said to me like, "Do you not have feelings?" I'm like, I do, but I don't have, like, I feel like marriage at that age would have, what's the word, chained me down,
Uh,
because for me marriage was a responsibility,
yeah.
right? And I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for a family in my
Oh, yeah.
20s,
Uh,
right? And all my friends saw were the romance in it, but I was like, okay, fine, you got the big wedding and the white dress, and what's after that? And I never talk about it to anyone, to be honest. It was all in my head because I feared so much that will
mm,
be judged, right? And I
mm,
didn't tell anyone that I don't want to be married until I'm 30, right? Because that would have been like, you lost your mind. And
mm.
I remember telling one of my closest friends, who told me, you just have a complex because of your parents' divorce. And I was like, sure, I do.
Oh,
Sure,
okay. Yeah.
right? And well, I think they made a mistake, and I just, you know what? I don't want to make the same mistake. I want to be mature enough to choose.
That's what I
Um,
thought too about my parents, because they also divorced, and I was like, you guys suck. Like, you don't know how to do this. Yeah.
I mean, when you grow up, you realize, well, we all suck too, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay. And
absolutely.
that's okay. But it's just, choose when to suck and when not to. You
Yeah.
have the choice.
No,
Correct.
Stuck wisely.
Stuck wisely, yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, like I didn't know what it's called, but you described well when you said commitment and what's so not,
Mm.
right? And I just love it. I love that you how did you travel to India the first time? Like was it how did you decide India?
Oh wow. Well, I mean, it's there's a lot to the story, so I don't know like how many hours you have, but
I'll do 4 hours with you,
no,
right?
no, no.
Part one and part two. It's okay. Tell me what you
Okay,
got.
so yeah, right. No, it's so how did I end up in India? Like, of course you're not asking me like what airlines, but how did I get there? There's a story about me as a young sort of man, boy, hippie, free thinker,
Mm,
freedom sort of lover, like all that sort of stuff. Like that's kind of my character, my sort of my values. And,
mm,
did always quite well at school, but I lost my interest a little bit.
mm,
And, I was getting into like spirituality. I liked, like, I'm living right in Amsterdam and I was going to, I was actually for school, I was doing an essay about concentration and meditation. And
mm,
so I was doing some research about Buddhism and other ways of meditating or working with the mind. And so to me, that was so interesting because I don't know, it was just a whole new sort of field for me, right? And I was reading about meditation and about the Buddhist lifestyle of mainly nonviolence, like ahimsa,
mm,
and to show compassion and kindness and to not only do the least harm, but also do the most good, right? So I
mm,
thought, wow, that's very interesting, like lifestyle. Like where can I learn more about this or where can I actually experience some of this? Like, so what do you do? Do you go to like a meditation group or a little club or is there a master? Cause I'm reading about the meditation master. And so where is this place? And so I started to look it up a little bit. That's like I'm 53. So this is way before Google and internet. So it's all
mm,
like analog. You got to look it up. You got to
mm,
go to the local library and find places. And so I went to like a Zen meditation place and I went to another meditation sort of practice. And there was like an Indian female guru.
mm,
And then one day I was walking out of my house to go to see my friend and I came up and I saw like music and dancing in the street. And these were the Hare Krishna people. And I was like, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, like, I thought this is like, My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, right? That song. I thought, oh, these guys, I thought this was from the 60s or the 70s. Like, how funny, right? That these guys are
mm,
still around, like doing their thing. I was like, it's so funny. And I saw this girl, right? Like brown skin, beautiful, like makeup, like Indian, whatever. And I was like, wow, look at these people. They're like so beautiful. Like they're so like shiny. And they
mm,
give me like a little flyer with some peanuts in a packet. And I read the invitation and the address and it was right around the corner from where I lived. So I
mm,
was like, oh, that's interesting. Put it in my pocket and I went about my way. And anyway, long story short, I started going to this temple and I was like looking at the philosophy and some of the old ancient Indian philosophy that they are practicing and preaching and studying and
mm,
trying to embody by living it. And I was like, that's very interesting. I was really interested because a lot of the things I was reading in the research for my essay, it was all about India, Bhagavad Gita, like some of the holy scriptures and the resources they were quoting in the study books for my essay. But
mm,
here I am with the people that actually live by these books that were referenced. So I was like,
mm,
that's interesting. I'm like more close to the source. So I started to study that and I started to come for some of the morning meditations, which start at 4:30 in the morning, which is like, it's a bit, I'm not an early bird necessarily. I'm more of a night owl.
oh yeah.
little plug.
Where we met. Yeah.
Exactly. That's how we know each other. How
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I experienced a certain type, like I did the meditation in the morning, right? And I listened to the class that was being given. I had the breakfast. I helped clean the floor, and someone gave me like a big flower garland. You know what I mean? That was used in the morning church temple service. And I walked out the door, me with my long hair and my hippie pants, and I was like 17, I think, at the time.
Mm,
Or 17, yeah. And I walked out the door. It was like a morning in April. It was a beautiful sunny spring day.
mm,
And it was 9 a.m. I had done all of these hours of meditation and all that. And I walked and all of a sudden the sunbeams hit me. And I experienced this kind of happiness that I
mm,
can only like compare to some like sort of like out of body or like someone on LSD or something. I don't know, like
Hmm.
something out of like that. I don't know. I've never had that from like drinking a beer or anything. Like that was a really far out experience. It was pure happiness. That was complete pure. There was
Hmm.
nothing that it had induced it other than sort of the meditation and the sort of the
Hmm.
whole humble experience that I had gone through.
Hmm.
It was like, wow, to me, that was a big turning moment. So since that day, I started to make plans to want to go to India, right? So I was working in my dad's business. I was
Hmm.
putting money aside. I was saving up. And then the sort of the president of the temple, so to say, like he saw that I was coming quite frequently, and he asked me like what my plans were, and that they were going to India in January, and if I wanted to join them, so that I was always going to be like in the right place at the right time with the ticket, everything would be taken care of, right? So I thought it was a great idea. I did that for 2 months. I did that for 6 months, and then I ended up staying there.
Hmm.
And it was, yeah. I mean, I've never really regretted a single day that I was there, and it's not easy.
It's not.
But it's pretty nice because I'm a white guy, and a white guy there's a lot of temples that are for Hindus only.
Hmm.
Like both
Oh,
you and
I
I
did.
would not
I
be allowed in there. But as a
I didn't
white
know.
guy, like so all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, like I understand. So like because I'm coming from a white country and people feel discriminated against or excluded or whatever, and now I'm the white guy. I'm actually the bad guy because we used to
Hmm.
freaking colonize these places for hundreds of years. And I'm here now, and I just have to like live humbly by their
Hmm.
rules and by their customs and all these things. And I wanted to learn the language. I wanted to like honor their culture and learn
Yeah.
about it. So it was
And
very,
you
yeah, that
stayed
was the
there.
reason. That's how I got to India.
What kind of story? Like as if you were destined to go.
Phew, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Actually, to me, it was
Was
very natural. It's very
yeah.
natural.
It was like it was flowing. It
Hmm.
was like a as if you were flowing with a river, right? And it took you there.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. But I
No.
gotta say, like the third time that I went there, that I ended up staying there, I
Mm.
flew with like the cheapest airline, like the Romanian airline, and I had like a 12-hour layover in
Mm.
Romania. And the
Mm.
only thing they had was vodka, cigarettes, and potatoes. That was the only thing they had over there.
I don't know what's what, guys. I'm sorry.
What vodka? Like I don't drink vodka, and I don't
Vodka? Oh,
vodka.
vodka. Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay. Okay.
vodka, cigarettes. So I don't like potato. Yes, but I mean, anyways, that was an
Okay.
interesting experience. But you will. I have a lot of these kind of unexpected experiences of being stuck in some airport or like getting in the wrong taxi or whatever. Yeah,
I have an expected experience where I close the doors on me and they don't open. I get like locked,
yeah, yeah,
and it's
yeah.
always the bathroom. I don't know why. It's always in someone's place, and it's funny for the people, but not for me. So I can relate to unexpected experiences. I love this story, and the reason when I had you in my mind since I heard your podcast with
Right.
son, and you were talking about your heart surgery. But
Mm,
sometimes we question ourselves on whether to invite people. What are they gonna
mm.
say? Are they gonna come? Since I just started this podcast, but
Sure. Yeah.
you said the five moment of meeting Pret. Was it Pret the girl that you
Yeah.
saw the first time?
Bread. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Was
Absolutely.
she? Like, when you were saying,
Oh, when I met Brett, if
yeah,
I knew that she was the girl, you mean?
yeah.
Or
No,
oh,
I met the girl you saw at the beginning. Was she Brett? Is it Brett? Brett?
yeah,
Am I
Brett,
pronounced
Brett,
Brett?
Brett,
Okay.
the
Okay.
girl that I saw in the I'm not sure.
Remember when you said you met the group of people who were singing and there was a beautiful
Oh, okay.
mountain?
No, no, that was
No,
not. That wasn't Brett.
that
No,
was
no,
not her.
no.
Okay.
She was significantly younger. She was more a child
Oh,
than
a
a
child.
than a
Okay, okay.
woman. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I want to go and ask about India and everything, but I can't forget my question about how you met Brett. So I want to
Oh,
ask about this. Yeah.
yeah. So that's also a very interesting story. It was 23 years ago, or going 24, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Brett
after
is
my
his
time in
wife,
England.
right?
Brett is
What's
my wife. Yeah,
yes.
and that was after my time in India.
Mm.
Uh, while I was in India, I was also traveling. around Asia, mostly Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Singapore, and
Mm.
Hong Kong, and a little bit of China, but mostly like India, Singapore. That was kind of like, and
Were you traveling for spirituality, or there was another reason?
well, it was part of my service that I was doing as a
Oh,
monk. I was
uh,
living life
oh,
as a
you
monk.
were a monk.
Yeah, I was a celibate monk.
Were
I was
you?
totally living a very strict life of no coffee, to tea, or cigarettes, or meat, or eggs, or fish, or
Wow.
sexual encounters, or whatever. Yeah, so no gambling and all these things. That is just part of the ashram life, right?
Oh,
And that's how you build character. Also, if you can withstand that sort of like, you know, pressures and urges and everything, like you try to be totally in control. I mean, I'm not saying I'm always succeeding, but that's the program you're on. You know what I
that
mean?
looks like Ramadan for us.
Yeah. But
Fasting.
this 24/7.
It's 24/7.
It's
But for
every day of
us,
the year.
yeah, it's just one month where you don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
most people know Muslims fast, but
Oh yeah.
people think we don't eat or drink. That's it. But you have to
Yeah.
control all your urges and desires,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
including like from sunrise to sunset, including sexual encounters and
Yeah.
getting too angry. And if you
Yeah.
did all of those, you lost your day. So there's more to it than not drinking and eating.
Yeah, it's not easy though. I gotta tell you that for 10 or not for about 14 years or so. So
14
that's what
years.
happened. Hmm?
You were a monk for 14 years?
Yeah, like roughly
Wow.
living that lifestyle for about 14 years.
From what
But
age?
the like so meeting Brit is pretty much when I had sort of said goodbye to that lifestyle. Like, I mean, I still live this lifestyle, but not in a monk fashion. So
Mm,
what I mean by goodbye means like when I was not living in the ashram like a monk, right, with monk robes and with pretty much a begging bowl, right?
mm, mm,
But it's a somewhat more advanced type of begging bowl, like with bank accounts, and like that kind of like you are in service of the bigger service, which is to serve mankind, which is to serve like rural areas with food or with water connections and wells or with education or with book printing or like all these things. Like as a monk, yeah, I'm the servant of all of these things and I'm helping to raise funds.
mm,
And that's how I got into print and design. But I'm going to answer your question about meeting Brit because I said goodbye to this type of intense lifestyle. And I ended up in Singapore where I had connections and I kind of got stuck there a little bit. And I also got a little bit too cozy in terms of like, a friend of mine invited me for a birthday party, which also happened to be on my birthday. So she was like,
mm,
"Oh my God, you have to come." And
mm,
so we ended up going to this friend's house, and then we ended up going to this club. And I
mm,
hadn't been to a club in like 15 years or whatever. And before I used to party like
mm,
quite a bit. Trust me, I've done that. But I got to this club, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, how fun! Like I haven't done this in so many years. And then I had a drink, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is not really, that's not what I signed up for back then. But like for now, let's just like take it easy a little bit and roll with the whatever is happening here. Like I'm enjoying my life,
mm,
and I'm making friends, and so I was in this one club one night in Singapore, and there was a guy that came up to me, and he would introduce himself, and he found out that I was Dutch, and he said, "Oh my God, I have to bring my friend." Because this guy was Jim and his friend was Brit. And because they used to like live together and work together in Singapore. And because I was Dutch and Brit is also, she's American, but she's Indonesian Dutch or Dutch
mm,
Indonesian. So she's also part Dutch. So
mm,
he was like, oh my God, you have to meet my friend Brit because she's Dutch. So you guys can speak Dutch. You can guys like whatever. So that's how we kind of like were brought together. And from the moment that I met her, I knew that she was like meant, like we were meant to be together. I knew that from that moment. Like honest to God.
mm.
And we have been together almost since the day we met.
No. Did
Yeah.
she match the energy? Did she know too? Like,
Well, I mean, I think we have a very matching, like she has a very strong spiritual roots and values and
mm,
beliefs and they're very similar and so so what, it's very natural for us to agree or to like see things like the same way, or like, not that we always do, but in
Yeah, but
that
there's
time when we were getting to know each other, it's like all these aha moments and light bulbs that went off, and it was very natural. Like
mm,
there was no sort of sense to like try to prove myself or try to like impress the girl or vice versa. It felt very natural, like homecoming. Like there's no real
wow.
effort. It's just like, you know, it's that sort of comfort.
Yeah.
And that to me was a very special experience that I felt like if I had ever done any good deeds, that had like, culminated in meeting her. You
Mm,
know what I mean? The good deeds that were, you know, coming back to me, then that would actually be in the form of her coming into my life. That's how I felt.
gosh, I want to cry.
Oh no, I mean,
That was good. No, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not an easy crier, unfortunately. I wish I was. But
yes,
no, I think crying is a very natural thing to express your
yeah,
feelings.
yeah.
It doesn't come natural to me. I need to go through hell. But was just, it felt like you were writing a poem about her when you were
Oh wow,
saying. It felt like you were
that's
saying
nice.
homecoming. You're saying it was
Yeah,
natural. It's
yeah,
the comfort you didn't need to,
yeah.
and that's goals for me at least, because yeah, this is, I was talking to Ray the other day and I said, if I'm looking for something, I'm looking um for a home, not just a
Mm-hmm.
man, someone who feels like home. Otherwise, I'm not going to settle for less, right? We're talking about this. And you just said it, right? And that's so amazing. What an amazing start. And the amazing thing is what you said, if I ever did any good deed, they all come by meeting her. They all came back to me by
Yeah,
meeting her, which is,
that's what
yeah, and you've been together since. I
yeah,
love
yeah.
this.
So pretty much since day one. Because also funny situation, I was in Singapore, but I was getting tired of being in Singapore. And my
Bored.
friend, my monk friend, who was in
Mm,
India, but he's Australian,
mm,
and we would always travel together a lot. And so
mm,
he was in India, I was in Singapore, and we were in contact.
yeah.
And I was like, yeah, man, Singapore is like eating me up, you know, like as a monk, you know, like I wasn't a monk living back
Mm,
then, but I was telling him, it was like, yeah, it's not really good for my monkhood, so to say.
yeah. Yeah.
So he's like, I'm coming to get you. Like, I'm going to Sydney for the Sydney Olympics in
Mm,
2000. He
mm,
says, and I'm going to like, you're going to jump on the plane with me and both going to Sydney. I'm going to stop over in Singapore. And that's when I met her. And I had just given my notice to my landlord, right?
mm,
So that I'm leaving at the end of the month and I'm going to Sydney. But the
mm,
thing is that it was really hard to get tickets because that was the Olympics and everything was fully booked. So to
mm,
get on I was on a wait list on 3 different airlines. That
yeah.
wasn't happening. And I met this girl that I wanted to get to know better,
Mm,
Brit. And so I was kind of torn, but I was sharing this with Brit. And so my lease was up. I had to either move out or move away or go to Sydney, which I didn't have a ticket for. So I told her, she said, well, you can just move it right in here. And I had just known her for 2 weeks, you know, and I was
mm,
like, well, that seems a little crazy. Like, I mean, I barely know you.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And her friend who she was working for at the gym, he came from New York City and he opened a gym there and she was his assistant and they both lived in a nice apartment that was paid by the company with a pool and everything, you know, the kind of living. And
Mm,
they said, just move in. And so after some deliberation, I did move in. And that's how we been together since that day. Yeah.
mm.
That's pretty cool. But I just did. I just like, yeah, I was like, this is the craziest thing that someone's telling me to move in. But you know what? Either that or go to Sydney.
Mm.
And I'm happy I did. I did stay in Singapore. So that was very good.
I told Son that I don't proactively do anything. And I don't know if that's passive, right? And he said you're passive. But like remembering what he told me,
Mm,
I've always I didn't think it was passive. I always thought it's just faith in how
mm,
things would flow into my life.
mm.
And I think that's what was happening with you. You.
Well, that I'm sure that things are flowing in that same way, like you're saying. But I was definitely open to meeting somebody, and I also knew that my guru, my teacher, kind of sent her to like take
Mhm.
care of me because I was not living a very good and healthy life in Singapore. Nightlife is pretty wild,
Okay.
and I was loving it. And it's not so good for you, maybe for a weekend,
But
but
not
not
for
for
the.
not for a year. You know what I mean?
Was that? Did you like? Uh, I'm just gonna ask it, right? Was it like you were starving for this, and you just got the opportunity to do it because you were a monk?
Was I starving for what? For the
For the
nightlife?
nightlife, for everything.
I don't think I was when I kind of like by accident rolled into it.
Mm,
Like, it wasn't planned or anything and I wasn't really meditating on it, like, what I was missing out. I had a pretty fulfilling life.
okay.
It just so happened that, you know, like, I mean, there's more to the story. There's like multiple layers to the story, right?
Mm,
So because my teacher, whom I dearly loved, and I mean, I can tell you in all honesty, I would be willing to walk through fire for him, like if that's what he wanted, right? Not that
mm,
he would ever want me to, but the extent to which I had so much trust and faith in him, and I've seen him being like a most amazing human being that I have personally ever met, and I learned so much from him. And so he passed away in '96, and the years that followed, for lack of leadership and not just leadership, but really an inspiring, sort of force in my life and my other brothers and whoever was related and associated with that sangha, that community.
mm,
There were some cracks and there were some like arguments and some politics and some influence and there's a bank account and
mm,
there's properties and like all these things just bring, the human nature like out of ego and fear or I don't know what. But I was a relatively young boy and here are all these like more senior monks and people and
mm,
they're not quite really like dealing with each other like I would expect like monks or spiritual people would do. And it's not that they have to live up to my expectation, but I felt like very misaligned. Like, I don't know what they're doing, but whatever
mm.
they're doing, I don't want to be a part of
Part of
that.
it.
Also, that's why I kind of also got a little bit stuck in Singapore. And here I am with all these new friends who aren't fighting. And all we do is just celebrate life and go out and party at night.
Mm.
That
Okay.
was my thinking. It was
Okay.
innocent because if I was ever hurting anyone, I would only be hurting me, right? I was thinking like, I'm not hurting anybody. And that's how I met. So I don't think I was really starving, but what I was starving for, I think, was human connections.
I was just gonna
Because
say that. Yeah.
yeah, because in the ashram, it was very sort of like spiritual and like it's very different. Like humans, like you're a spirit being first, and then you are a human, right? Like so
Mm,
that idea of like you are a spirit soul having a human experience, right? You are not a human soul having a spiritual experience. That sort of flip. So you're
mm,
very much in that consciousness and that sort of transcendental consciousness.
mm,
And what I have found and experienced, and I'm not sure that it's the truth or that it is true for everyone, but in my experience, it's like it was lacking depth in our relationships. They're very sort of like almost very business like, I don't know, but there was very little human connection where you really get to know the human, like
mm.
you as a human and your story and all that. Like people don't talk about it. They talk about philosophical and the rule and the ritual and all these things. And I do like that too. That's really beautiful.
I think that's what you were starving for, right?
Yeah.
And I've been in relationships where we are advocating for mental health, for example,
Yeah.
or we are, I don't know. And then out of nowhere, you think of this person because you were saying the senior monks and etc., right?
Yeah.
And I think what happened, I don't know what you call it. You see, I've seen an Egyptian show long time ago when I was a kid of this man who has 5 daughters. Then the mother passed away,
Hmm.
and then he has to deal with the daughters.
Mm.
even though they're like in different ages. He realized, and this happens in every family, especially traditional families. Maybe nowadays, men or fathers are more into the family, or like maybe this is my experience. I don't know, but you would see the mother out of the equation, and then the
Okay.
father has to deal with the human experience of having daughters, right? Because he was not there. She was like, so sort of the connection between the two, and that was happening. I think, I'm not sure, this is how I saw it, that what was happening to you when you had this teacher, and then he was the one dealing with the senior monks, you, and like building connection, and that connection was not there anymore. So
Yeah. Wow.
the philosophy just flew away, and everyone had to deal with human feelings and experiences.
Yeah.
And because this was your first time, all of you, to show your human side,
Yeah.
um I would have done the same. I would have like taken myself away. um but I know nowadays, I tell myself, Sabreen, maybe you should have stayed more to work on this. I
Mm.
don't regret
Mm.
leaving some situations, but I always ask myself what would have happened if I worked harder,
Sure. Sure.
right?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Of course, it's natural, I think, to wonder, and
It's
that's okay
natural.
too. Like to create to make up a story or to like imagine something that you know is not happened,
Mhm.
and there's also nothing you can do about it. But it would have been like what would have or could have been, right? Why not ponder upon it? Sometimes it's also quite innocent, yeah. But it wasn't really very conscious. But I think the sort of the inner craving for that human connection was there without
Mm,
me knowing it. But there was like when you say craving, it was like really a need that
mm,
needed to be fulfilled. Like it's something that I think the human heart or soul cannot live without, right? Like just
yes.
only rules or like abstinence for like really close yourself off for all these pleasures. And I think that at some point, and maybe for some time, that might be good training and character building. Like
Yeah.
some people join the military for 2 years, right? In Holland, we used to have that, like that you have to join the military when you're 18 for I think a year and a half. You know, it's a way that society, I guess, just makes
Men,
boys
men.
into men, right?
Yeah. We have it in Sudan too. I don't like it, but we have it. Because I'm such a like a it's just for men, and I worry too much about the people I love. So the idea of
Yeah.
violence scares me.
I was ready to go into the military, but that year that was the last year that it was mandatory, so it
Mandatory.
was abolished, and
Mm,
so I'm happy that I didn't have to go, but I did submit myself to a different type of discipline of
yes.
living that monk life, but coming out of that was not really a conscious decision, but it was really the longing of my heart or something that I wanted to
Mm,
have like really human connections and not like look down on people or see people as like untouchables, or not that they are, not that that's what the teachings are saying, but you
mm,
can definitely feel that there's a separation between like the monk life and society or materialistic life or however
mm,
you want to label it, right? Even the fact that you have to label it is already for myself a distance, right? I want to bridge that, and I want to just like be like normal people and not be like, yeah. So because yeah, that to have that connection, that real authentic, and that's what I guess drives me, and
mm,
that was also the thing that drove me earlier, that freedom,
mm,
right? That inner compass that was that pointing me there, and to be free from those shackles or the institutional religious sort of doctrine or dogma or something that's being put on you that you submit to, which can have many benefits. But I think at some point the mind needs to like be free and to find its own way with what it knows
mm,
and whatever character was built, to find your own way in the world and not just be the eternal ashram dweller, so to
mm.
say. That's my experience. And for me, it went a little bit like that. You know what I mean? I was partying, I was having fun for like a good year, and then I met Britt, and then I quieted down,
Yeah.
and then we were also kind of like done with Singapore. We were actually going to move to Sydney, but that it didn't happen. And so we ended up moving to Bali. That was our honeymoon. We moved
Yeah,
to
but
Bali. We stayed there for a year.
for a year.
Yeah.
And how did the designing and everything came to you? You said there's a story behind this because of all
Okay.
your
Yeah.
services.
Yeah. Yeah. What I do is right now I freelance. I wouldn't say like I run a business. It has to do also with the recent couple of years. But
Freelancing is business. It's harder business,
no,
right?
I would tell you about the difference, like freelance or business. I mean, of course, it's all business, but I'll come back to that. But what I'm saying is that I've always been creative and artistic in like doing murals.
Mm,
When we were like 14, 15, 16, me and my brother did like graffiti, and we were getting paid and commissioned to do like storefronts and stuff like that. Bigger, better, right? And we were really kids, but that was fun. So we always had that in us. And anyways, long story short, when I ended up going to India, and I was also going around Singapore and Malaysia and places to collect funds for our projects, right?
yeah.
And I wanted to report back on how we're doing and how we're using the money through a magazine or some sort of newsletter, right?
Mm,
And we did have a publishing department in our ashram,
mm,
very sort of like humble and all that, but there was some Indian monk who was good with computers, and he was teaching me a little bit because I had a natural interest being a designer. I used to do like airbrush, and I used to all these things like with paint and pencil, but here this computer age, and I was learning that. So we're talking about 91, 92.
okay.
And so I was picking up the skills like Photoshop and like PageMaker back then and all that. So I started to produce our newsletters and magazines, and then I started to produce my teacher's books. I was transcribing them and cleaning them up and editing them and finding all the quotes and the resources he was quoting and putting it in a design and having it printed and then shipping and selling. And I
Mm,
was doing that all as a 23-year-old. I was just picking that up. I had this natural inclination, or I don't know, like I know one of the exercises in this community that we're part of, like when was a moment that you felt like something needed to be done or something wasn't done right, or and that you took up this kind of leadership
mm,
role without
mm,
being asked, but you just stepped in. Like so, I felt that I stepped up to the plate to do something that I felt was an obvious thing to do, but no one was doing it. I was like, well, if no one's doing it, then maybe it's up to me to do
mm,
it and stop waiting and telling everyone why it's not being done. So I did that. So I started to do that, and it got like more and more advanced and fancier, and going back and forth to like Malaysia and Singapore, and they had all this like advanced printing and design agency. So I started to hang out there and like pick up these skills, and it got fancier and fancier, or in the sense like a little bit more advanced and a little bit more, uh, I wouldn't say professional, but I guess professional enough to print thousands and thousands and thousands of books and magazines and whatnot. This is
mm.
all before internet.
Wow.
And then, so and then when we moved to Bali, we had also had a computer, and we had one of the first like digital cameras, I guess. Like, I mean, that's how old we are. But we're talking like early 2000s, right? Or 99 or I think 2000. And we had a nice digital camera and a nice computer and a nice printer. And so what we were doing is we would go around. We started our business with furniture and statues and garden, like rocks and stones and fountains, like all that stuff that you find in Bali, like in abundance. Like you can't stop looking. You just go on these big roads. And so we had our motorbikes and our flip flops, and we were just
Mm,
living the Bali life,
mm,
and go and take pictures and talk to the shop owners and the manufacturers and all that. And we
mm,
put a catalog together and a website. And like, so I was doing all the design and cutting out presenting all of the Balinese, like, good stuff in a attractive way. So that's how my design skills kind of developed, and my interest in it grew. And so I learned these things along the way. And I mean, long story short, we end up moving to, I mean, talking about my design sort of like development, if that's what you want to know, I could elaborate a bit more. Like it's a bit like, so from Bali, we moved to New York to sell, because we put a container together with all sorts of beautiful things from Bali, send it to New York.
mm,
And then we left for New York to join Brit's family and
mm,
stay with them. And then we would sell the stuff that's on the way. And
Mm.
that's exactly when 9/11 took place. So the towers came down
Mm.
and we were watching. We didn't even have a TV where we lived in Bali. We had to go to a cafe because her mom rang us on the cell phone and it said, like, you have to turn on the TV. It's like, well, we don't have a TV. You know, it's like, it's the world. The world has started. You know what I mean? Or the war has started.
Yeah.
We're like, what's going on and all that. But anyway, we we had stuff on the way to New York. We were going to go to New York. We got to New York. It was definitely ghost town, and it wasn't easy. But we sold all of our stuff. But the business like couldn't go further because of all sorts of these limitations logistically with Indonesia and coming to the U.S. And it wasn't really super happening.
Mm.
And so we were in New York for a while, but then I ended up moving back to Holland. Anyway, long story short, we were both back in Holland, which I hadn't been in a long time, and I needed work. This is the first time that I actually went for a job. I never had a job other than working for my dad,
Mm.
right, in his business. But I was monk. I was doing fundraising. I was doing designing. I was doing a lot of things, but not working for a boss. But now here I am, needed to make an income and feel like, you know what, all this entrepreneurial stuff and this hustle, so to say, with the furniture, and I'm just going to go get a job, see if I can get a job. And I got a job and all that. And it was all like design and it was all like advertising and marketing and all that whole. So that's when I got into the field like proper, so to say. Right. And wanted to use my whatever lived experiences that I brought with me to use that in my work, like international connections and that sort of thing, and a natural kind of eye for design and a sort of intuition for marketing and branding. Like no professional or no academic sort of education in those fields, but quite
Yeah, I get
hungry as I was, going for courses and trainings and learning all these things along the way.
Mm.
That was really fun. That was actually quite fun. And so now we're talking 2006, going 2008, 7, 8, 9. Um, in 2008 and 2009, that was the like sort of global credit crunch, right? Like the whole like economies in the world were collapsing. And so there was a lot of projects that we were running that were being shut down. And so I was one of the last ones that joined the company. So I was going to let go in like 3 months or so. I
Mm.
was like, oh, here I am. What am I going to do? But by that time, I was doing web design and
Mm.
design and stuff also on the side already, like for clients that I was making some little extra pocket money. I
Mm.
was like, you know what? I'm just going to like develop that and turn that into like my business, like my own freelancing business. And that's when that was in 2009. And I've never looked back since. Like I've been doing that since that time. And yeah, I mean, and it's been really interesting that my journey and also how I got to know Sun Yi, Night Owl Nation,
Mm.
through my design and working with clients.
Mm.
Like at some point, I was started to work with clients in Holland that were like, doing very, very well. They're coaches and speakers and authors.
Mm.
And and she was a student, so to say, of Gabby Bernstein, right? Which is
Yeah.
the client of Sun Yi. And so back in 2016, I already checked out Night Owl Interactive and, the Gabby Bernstein, that sort of type of branding,
Mm.
like call it spiritual branding or whatever, but it is a different type of branding, a personal brand
Mm.
that's very much leading with their spiritual values and beliefs and practices. And to also to like turn that into like, viable businesses and livelihood, and through workshops and writing and through like courses and all these things. And I was going right into that wake to like
Mm.
fill that need to like not just create websites, but to create websites that are infused with like spiritual values and branding and messaging and stuff like that. So it kind of looks different than a pure business professional
It aligns with
coach
who you
website.
are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Your own personality
Mm.
as the brand, as the experience, right?
Yeah.
So that is something that I really discovered that was different than sort of my upbringing because I did grow up in an entrepreneurial family, and I was
Mm.
always trained to answer the phone and to see people that would come and visit my dad in his office or a hotel or restaurants and places, like always being super professional and just like straight, like don't talk like like politics or personal stuff or like I mean it's just pure business and that you're on your way.
Mm.
So when I learned about this spiritual type sort of branding business, that was a shift That was definitely what we would call like an aha moment, or a
Mhm.
pivotal 5 second moment where I was
Yeah,
like, oh, hold on, this is a whole different way of doing it. A
it's
lot of
doable.
people say like you have to do it this way, but there's
You
a
can
bigger
do it.
and bigger and growing market to do it very
Yeah,
different.
things shift really fast in life.
Yeah.
Because I remember when, I mean, I don't know how to describe this to you, but I remember like um, when something I can relate to when I was a kid, when curly hair was the ugly hair, right?
Oh,
And now it's kind of authentic and natural. And, I don't know if you can relate to this or if you've ever seen it. But because I experienced it as a growing up, you always, to look
mm.
good, you always have to straighten your hair before hijab,
Oh,
of course,
right. Okay.
right? And now it's like, wow, you have curly hair. Wow,
I
I wish I
know.
have, and it's the same.
Yeah.
For I don't know that this is an analogy. I don't know if it's a good one, but I've
No.
noticed something. You were saying that you grew up in a family where things were like business like, answering the phone, not to mix things. And earlier you were talking about freedom and selling yourself to this and this. And I have noticed when we grow up in a certain environment, we tend to rebel against it.
Hmm.
Do you think in your subconscious that was happening to you?
Yeah. I don't know if I was rebelling so much to the discipline, or like I don't feel like there was a strong, like there was a whole lot of discipline. We're pretty free, sort of like family, but the business was always like that's serious, so you have to treat it seriously, right?
Mm,
So I kind of like I didn't really rebel against that part so much. It was more just rebelling against my parents, who in my eyes were failing at the time,
mm,
because they divorced when I was 7, and I have a younger brother and a younger sister,
mm,
and I don't think that they were treating us nice in the sense that the way they spoke about each other in front of us or
mm,
to us, and I always felt that there was a bit of a failure on their part, because you could have a failed marriage, but you could still be cordial, or like what's the word, like for your child, because that's my mom you're talking about, or that's my dad that you're talking about, right?
mm,
So when they did that, I developed in myself a sort of like an like I didn't really take anything from them, because in
mm.
my view they didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Like I was maybe 16 at the time. Like I started to like maybe rebel, but more towards their parenting. But the other parts, like the business part and that sort of discipline, I always felt like I benefited from that, because I always
Mm,
brought that with me if I go for a job or if I go for some responsible project. And I feel like I have that sense of like, when I was in the temple, when I joined that ashram in Amsterdam,
mm,
one of the first jobs or services they had me do is work in the kitchen. Like the Hare Krishnas are also referred to as the kitchen religion,
mm,
because it is a lot about food. It's all about the food, right? Because yeah, I mean, food is the festival, is the culture, it's the spreading, it's the giving away, the charity, it's everything.
food is
The
everything.
preparing,
Yeah.
like everything is a part. And so I was doing the kitchen work, and they always liked me because I was good and clean with chopping, because that's what I learned.
Mm,
My dad had restaurants and hotels, and so to make $10 on a Saturday, right? I was chopping vegetables and cleaning pots, and so I learned all these things that in the temple as a monk was like, oh
mm,
yeah, 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 we need him, So that was always. So I always felt like I learned a great deal from that upbringing.
mm,
Like even although I talk about it like I didn't really care too much, but I do. I got a great deal out of it. Like I
mm,
do love my mom and dad, and with my mom I had a different relationship. Like we both made music. Like she played keyboards and I played guitar. I mean, I
mm.
was just starting, and she was also like practicing, and that's how we bonded. Like
Bonded.
we've got recorded. Like she's passed away
Oh,
in
sorry.
2007 or eight, and so there's still tapes of us playing, like recorded, like playing the guitar and like Lionel
Mm,
Richie or something, the Beatles, or so
yeah.
that's the kind of relationship that we had. Like she was very creative, like doing
Mm.
drawings or arts or making dolls or making, a wall piece. I don't know. That was
And
always
you
cool.
you got this from her, the genetics. You
I think
think?
so. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Creative, yeah. Because my brother's also super creative, and so is my sister. They both work in, like, my brother does graffiti, like he does a really good job.
Yeah.
And my sister has like an art studio that she works also with kids, and I don't know, like something also quite spiritual actually. So it's a, yeah.
So
I
all
love
of
my
you.
brother and sister. Although my sister lives in Holland and my brother lives in the Caribbean,
Oh,
so we don't see. But you know, with Facebook and all this, like you, or with like FaceTime and all that, you can talk to each other every day if you want to.
yeah.
So
Do you think, because I'm the oldest too, and in my parents' marriage, we also we're two sisters and one brother, and from my mom, I have two brother and sister. Do you think the divorce made you closer as siblings?
um, that's a good question because we didn't grow up together. Like I was my daddy's boy. I
Mm.
was the older. And when I was, so the short answer is I don't know.
You don't-
I could like sort of philosophize like both ways.
Mm,
We're pretty close, but I don't know if the divorce had anything to do with it. That's I
mm.
think that's the honest answer.
So, how did you get close to your siblings? I'm interested in siblings' relationship all the time
Oh yeah, yeah.
because those are the best relationship I have in my life.
Yeah. Well, growing up, me and my brother were inseparable. We were
Mm,
always playing soccer outside until it got dark, and then my mom would have to yell and yell and yell for the third time to
mm,
come inside and eat your dinner.
mm,
And after dinner, we would sneak out again until it was really dark and we had to like go to bed. We
mm,
were always playing soccer, so that was like that relationship we've always had as like 5, 6 year olds, 7, 8 year olds, I guess.
mm,
But then my parents divorced at my age 7, and like I think 2 or 3 years later or so, like I joined my dad. I moved to live with my dad and his then wife
mm,
and stepdaughter and like step brother, like half brother, and like a girl from another
mm,
marriage the
mm,
lady had. And I started living with them, and so I would see my brother and sister every week or every 2 weeks, and I would be more close with my brother and less with my sister. That came kind of later.
mm,
Um, but I moved around my dad and they kind of stayed put, and we would see each other, but we wouldn't grow up like since I was maybe 9 or so, that I wasn't in their lives or vice versa so much.
mm,
Um, but before that time, me and my brother were like super close. And then my brother also moved in with us, me and my dad and his wife, who had already left him by that time. By the
mm,
way, that's a whole nother story of like,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
My wife, my wife, my dad has two wives. I understand. All the,
Oh my God. Like, listen,
all,
I'm not even telling you all the details because it was, I don't know if that's fit for broadcasting,
no,
but
it's not.
in any case, yeah, yeah, no, I can tell you that already. You're so funny. But then my brother joined us, and then I ended up leaving for India, and so I didn't see my sister much until I did all that touring. I went to New York, and then moved back to Amsterdam, and that's when I started to get closer with my sister. And then my sister ended up living 10 minutes from where I lived, and so we would see each other like
All the time.
frequently all the time. And my brother also like 15 minutes, and my mom 20 like 10 minutes. It was all like we were all living together there for you know I would say about 7 or so, for about 5, 6 years after I
Mm,
moved back to Holland. Like we were very close to one another, seeing each other all the time with Brit and like cooking, with my mom because because she's died, but she had like a motorbike accident. So she was in a wheelchair, but she could walk, but she was not very sort of, what do you call it? Active. And, so we would all take turns or hang out. And my mom, though, she used to smoke these cigarettes, which was like crazy. You know what I mean? Like like you make it in a little thing, chuck chuck. You like put the tobacco in, and she would be smoking in the house, and it was like, Mom, like there's kids here, like you can't do that. You got to open the windows, like She's like, wow, It was so interesting. This is an interesting memory that I have that I associate that with like going to see my mom's because when you came back, I had to take our clothes off and put it in the washer.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
But she had a great sense of humor, and like music and those kind of interests, and like I was.
Creative people usually have good sense of humor. They
Yeah, yeah,
see
yeah.
humor in everything.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't call my. I don't know if I'm creative enough, but I have this sense of humor that not. I make fun of everything I go through life. I'll be in the worst situations and
Yeah,
I'll laugh
yeah,
about it.
good.
So I want to like recollect everything because I feel like we could be talking for hours, but there is a specific something I want to ask you about. But I want to go through what we talked about. You being young, family business, then in your teens, you don't want what everyone has
Mm.
around you. You want to be free, and you find spirituality. You go to the temple. Eventually, you move to India. The monk life. I
Mhm.
feel there is a show about you. It's not a film, because or like those kind of special episodes on Netflix where they're like 5 or 6. it would
Oh,
be
God.
it would be like,
Yeah,
when we wrote our story bank, when I wrote the
yeah.
story bank, it has mine was locations,
Uh-huh.
and I see your episodes like
Okay. Oh,
Holland,
yeah.
India, Monk Life, Singapore, the love of my life. It's stuff like that. And I love it. I love it. I love. I think you accomplished something. You found freedom through. I think
Oh,
your
it's
life is.
interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, though.
I
But
think
carry on. Let me please finish your thought.
okay.
Right?
I see it. I see it so far. It's just like a river passing by yourself. You're the river, right? You're passing by and you're carrying the experiences and just carrying it with you within you, right? And India and then Singapore where we met Prit, and then love of your life, the married life, Kuala Lumpur, New York, and then Holland. The question about Holland was, how did you feel going back? Because I remember every time I go back to Sudan,
Mm-hmm.
I see it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I go back. And I used to say, like, I remember the first time I went back when I'm like aware of things, I thought to myself, why is everyone different? I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid, but now I know no one was different. It was me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the last time with Brit, because I know there's a couple of times you went back. That last time where you lived with your siblings and your mom, not living, but you were all close to each other. What was different?
Okay, well, I mean, it was definitely a huge contrast from the life that I'd lived. Okay, so let me just go back, and you're asking me this question, and it's not necessarily, yeah, it is actually like when we were all living very close to one another. Because when I first went back, I went back first, and then Britt came like 6 months later. So I went back and I stayed with my mom for a few months, and I didn't have a car. I was like, what I was trying to do coming out of New York was trying to get a job,
Mm,
trying to get my driver license, which had expired, and find an apartment. Right,
mm,
those were my three main tasks. I stayed with my mom for a bit, and my brother had a bicycle that he said you could use this just to get around a little bit. And Holland is very flat and easily accessible by bicycle, super easy. Plus, you get a nice workout. And so it was actually December. I thought, if I'm going to go back, I might as well go for Christmas. So it
mm,
was December, and my mom lived in one place, and it would be like 10 minutes by car, but by bike in the winter snow and the rain and shit. Excuse my French, but it was very hard
mm,
on the bicycle to go to my brother's, and for like half hour on the bicycle, and it was like winter, and it's
mm,
like I didn't have like a super proper coat. Like I had my coat that I like was used to having like in Singapore. It's like, I mean, in Singapore you don't have a coat. I mean, people like there's just no coat. I mean, like it's always like 80
mm,
degrees, 70, 80, like air conditioning, and like, and I was like getting frozen hands. I was like, what have I done? I'm like, I can't believe it. I had a pool. I had like the sunshine, fresh
mm.
fruit, like everything, right?
Yeah.
And here I am. I was like, gosh, but there's a reason why I particularly went back to Holland, right? So I told you I have a 26-year-old.
Mm,
And so he was born. So he is not Brit's son. Of course, she sees him as her son, bonus son.
Mm,
But I was like, when I was like 16, 17, I had this like sweetheart girlfriend that we were like sort of the flower children of our little town, right? Like she
mm,
worked in this place and I was doing all the graffiti on the wall and on the ceiling. I was there for like a few months. So we got together and we lived together for a while.
mm,
And, but then we broke up and I ended up going this whole India thing. And then she ended up in India one day also in the same ashram. So anyway, long story short, we got together because we thought that this might be a good situation. Like we got the spirituality in our relationship, even although back then it didn't work out for different
mm,
reasons. And we got together and then we had a baby in the first year of us being together, married and all that, but it didn't work out. Like we were not supposed to be together. Like I can tell you
mm,
that. I can tell you that with like 100% certainty. But it's sad when there's a child involved, right? So
mm,
anyway, long story short, she ended up living in Holland. I ended up living in like Bali and then New York. And then for me, it's like, okay, where am I going to go next? Because this New York thing wasn't working out, and I wasn't getting
mm,
the green card
mm,
and the furniture business and the 9/11. So I
mm,
went back to Holland. I was like, okay, I just get a job. I want to see my son. I want to like he's 4 or 5 by this
mm,
time. I want
mm,
to be in his life. So that's the reason why I moved back to Holland because it wasn't the weather. Trust
mm.
me, and you know what I mean. So,
Mm,
um, but so overcoming those initial hurdles, because I mean, once you have your apartment and you have your job and all these things, life is pretty smooth and it's pretty nice, and you can fly anywhere from Holland.
mm,
I mean, we
mm,
lived about 15 minutes from the main airport, so
mm,
it was a pretty convenient life. Like I like Holland, and I started to see Holland also with very different eyes than when I left, like the Holland before I left for India and my whole big life there. Like
mm,
when I saw Holland then, it was like it's small minded. It's all like, blah, blah,
mm,
blah. I was like, no, no, no. But now when I came back, I saw the beauty of the country and sort of the history and the sort
mm,
of like the nature of the people, like compared to what I was used to, like living in Asia or in, Singapore. It's like, oh, wow, I mean, like, so because in India anything I would do, it was always like a bribe, or it was always like, am I being ripped off or something,
mm.
like like every
Yeah.
transaction you just
Mm,
don't know who you're dealing with and what they're like,
mm.
you know and of course when you're back in Europe, of course you get ripped off in different ways, right?
Yeah.
But that aside, but like you don't have that constant like battle with the taxi driver. It's just like whatever number it says, that's what you pay.
It's convenient.
Yeah, so
I have a
but
friend who's in love with Holland. She's in
oh yeah,
Amsterdam right now. I
um,
promised to visit. Um,
you'd love it.
um, I love this. I love that. I think that you found the beauty in your where you were born after you
Yeah.
found beauty somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you
Very.
had to do that to go back and see
I
the
think so.
beauty.
Yeah.
And this is what we do. I think I don't know if you have the same experience, but someone who grow up in one place and then they leave it, they start longing for their roots, and when they come back, the culture and everything feels different, right?
Hmm.
Even though they see the flaws that they saw before, but this
Hmm.
time they fall in love with those flaws. They're okay with it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
that was what you went through.
Yeah.
And I know I went through this so many
Yeah.
times in my life.
Now you have
And
that same experience of being uprooted, right? From where
yeah,
your friends grew up and everything, and now you are not, and then you're in a completely different
yeah, and
place. So
like
you totally relate.
yeah, and did you keep up? Did you still when you were in India? Well, things are different there. I remember before internet, my friends used to send me letters, and I have
Yeah.
them I still have them in a show box. And one of
Yeah.
my friends sent me a letter that had the latest joke, and I would
Oh yeah.
never forget that. She was like, nowadays my friend are blah blah blah, but this one, remember when she used to treat me when you were there? She's not treating me like that. And then while she was telling me this, she's like, oh, sorry for all of that, let me tell you the last joke. And it was so every time I read that letter, I don't
Yeah.
think she remembers. Every time
Yeah.
I read it, I cry and I laugh.
It's fantastic.
It
That
is
that to me, that is very priceless. That is
It is.
very, very priceless because I used to do the same. I used to write my mom every month or every 2 months.
Mm,
But in India, it's not so easy to get like put a letter in the mail. You never know if it's gonna end
make
up
it.
there. And it takes a month or whatever to send a letter to receive one. And
Mm,
by the time the letter arrives where I was staying, I've already moved on to another place because in India I moved also from few ashrams, right?
mm,
That are part of the same sort of structure, like institution, so to say.
mm.
And so I would come back to that place after 3 months and there would be a letter waiting that's been sitting there for 2 months, so,
Wow.
and that is really fun. And so I had all these letters and my mom also had all the letters and cards and whatnot that I would send her. She had that in a box. So when I came back to Holland, she showed me all that and we went through that and we were reading. And that's when I saw, wow, I've been to this place. I've been to Taiwan. I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Shanghai. I've been to Bali. I've been to Denpasar. I've been to Adelaide. I've been to, like all these like travels. And it's like literally like opening a photo book of your life and being transported back to that moment when you wrote that card or what the thing that you were describing that happened. Yeah, it's very nice. Actually, that's quite priceless.
I love this scene. I don't know. I
Yeah.
would choose it as your opening scene, and
Oh,
each letter takes us to the moment, and this one to
oh
that
yeah,
moment,
yeah,
and then maybe
oh,
the first when she opened the first letter, it takes us to the moment where you were sitting there in India and the river
yeah,
and
yeah,
everything, and then we go back to your
yeah.
upbringing. I I love people who travel because this is all I want to do in life, to
Mhm.
travel from one place to another.
Um,
Um, I think I do have a question that was one of the reasons that I want to talk to you in the podcast, because you were talking about a surgery and I had a
mm.
surgery, and I don't want to leave before I hear your surgery story, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind at all. It's quite a story actually. I haven't told it recently. Like, of course, when it was more recent,
Mm,
I would tell the story to quite a few people who would always ask me because I was recovering.
mm,
But and it's also a process of learning, right? Like
mm,
learning about the disease and the medical sort of terminology and whatnot, the
mm,
science,
mm,
and also about your own history and DNA and family DNA and all that genetics. And so we moved here in 2019 from Holland to
mm,
Connecticut.
mm,
And Britt's brother and his wife, they own this farm, this
mm,
sanctuary.
mm,
And it's nice and hilly and all that. And we were there in March for her brother's birthday, which is a few days before mine.
mm,
And we were walking up a little hill, not really super steep, but I was out of breath. And I was like, Britt, I need to get really back into shape or something, but this doesn't feel right. It wasn't painful, but I was wheezing and very short of breath. Like I could barely take a full gasp of air
mm,
so it was just not right. And I was like, you know what, tomorrow maybe we'll call the doctor and make an appointment. And so by the time we got home, like a few hours later,
mm,
I was like, I think we need to just like make an appointment right now online and go to urgent care or something
mm,
tomorrow. So they saw me that next day at like 5 p.m. I think it was. And the guy was like, do you have pain in your chest? I said, no, not really. I said, I feel like a flutter, like there's a little butterfly in my heart region. Like, you feel like a
mm,
flutter. I said, I know it's not supposed to be there. And that's why I'm here to
mm,
see what's going on. He said, are you short of breath? Yeah. He said, anyway, I'm not wasting any time with you to do an EKG.
mm,
I'm sending you straight to the emergency room, which was like 15 minutes. I mean, all of this is like within 10, 15 minutes from our house. It happened to be that there was a hospital and all that.
mm,
So he sent me to the emergency room and I got in there. They saw me immediately and they put me down on a this and that meter and they were measuring my heart. They were measuring my, like everything, like, when you get all your vitals, you get hooked
mm.
up with,
All the
and
machines.
then, yeah. And they need to do one test, another test, like what's causing this, right? Because then what they found out is that my heart is extremely weak.
Mm,
The EF is the ejection fraction of the heart that they measure. That's the strength by which it pumps blood through the body. That's called the ejection fraction. That's the strength and the power.
mm,
And mine, like a normal person would be around 65% EF. And if you're an athlete, maybe 70. And mine was like 10 or 12. So it was really weak and it's enlarged and it's also not synchronized. So the
Mm.
left and the right are completely like out of whack and trying to compensate for the lack
Mm.
of strength and all of the above. And so that's causing high blood pressure and low energy and shortness of breath, right? So, and I had no idea all these things. Like I'm learning this step by step as I'm being informed. I was like, what time do you think I can go home? And they were like, you're not going home. So I called my mother-in-law. I said, can you bring some snacks and things like that? Cause they're always like, they always ready to bring snacks and food and stuff here. And it was literally like a 5 minute ride. I'm not kidding. It's probably more like 3 minutes. And so I just took it. Britt was there. She stayed in the same bed with me in the hospital bed, which is like quite unheard of. But I was learning so much about, the heart and what was not working and what was our sort of plan, like what's next and what's next and what's next and x-ray and this and that. And then they needed to do they're going through the wrist, to check your heart. I
Yeah.
don't know what it's called, like
Oh, my mom.
categorized.
Yeah, my mom did it. I forgot what it's called, but I know they put. It's like a camera thing, and they go in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But since I was already have very low blood pressure, like they had to come in and like, make sure, but it was in a different hospital. It was not in the hospital where I was.
Mm.
I had to go an hour by ambulance to go to the hospital where they offered the service. And that was on my birthday that I was in the ambulance, And so it was all like so wild, like this whole experience with all these like signs along the road. And so I end up in hospital. They're doing the test, and in case they find something like slippage or whatever, like in the arteries, they can put a stent in, like to widen the artery. And but there was no problems. Like everything is squeaky clean. I mean, I do have to say, as a vegan, I don't consume dairy or like high cholesterol and all that, so which usually, like blocks up your arteries and all that stuff. We all know that it's not the best, right? To eat
Yeah,
tons of cheese and all, even though it tastes really good.
they do.
But so my heart, everything is like really clean. It's just that heart is like super weak. So they're figuring like this must be genetic. So
Mm-mm.
they were like, "Can you ask your father and whoever?" And I was like, "Oh my god, my aunt, just like 3 months ago, she contacted me through Messenger, and she's like, I'm undergoing like heart treatment or something, and we have this thing in our family. Like my dad had like a stroke, like 10 years ago. My aunt had like heart problems. My other uncle, he died from a heart attack. My grandfather died from a heart attack at like 57. Anyway, so now I'm starting to learn about all this history with the heart. My son had heart surgery before he was 1 year old in Holland,
Wow.
so we were quite aware, but I never put two and two together that that's the reason why my heart is so bad. And so, but they did, and they told me, and they also said that there's a remedy, and that if you were ever to be considered for a heart transplant, you would be an excellent candidate because everything is so clean, like your arteries and all that. But it's quite a step to be taking because, I mean, first of all, the heart will have to come from someone who's not died from a heart attack because that will cause like scars on the heart. And it cannot have died from a brain something. It has to usually be like suicide or overdose or an accident and stuff like that. I was like, holy Lord, like I don't want a heart like that in my body that has gone through so much trauma, like energetically, right? I'm already thinking that. Plus, like if you undergo such a surgery, you got to be ready whenever you get the call. You
Yes.
have to undergo like psychological testing and a whole evaluation.
Mm.
Plus, you have to be monitored for the next 2 or 3 years, like taking biopsies and making sure that the heart is not rejected. And you're going to take a whole bunch of pills. So I was like,
That's my
gosh,
life
like,
right now. But
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the life that I was looking at until, or you can have the defibrillator and the pacemaker that will kind of like synchronize your heart and like give you shocks or whatever. Like, so anyway, long story short, I had the operation. 12 days later, I was on my way home, but now I'm recovering, no energy, really like tired. I'm working, but only half days. I'm going through my green card still, which I still don't have. Right. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have all these massive bills, right? Because I don't have the proper insurance here because I'm not even a full citizen. But somehow or other, the state of Connecticut paid the whole bill, like something like $300,000. And I didn't pay a dime. The only money I paid was for the car park, to park the car. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how And even with the pills that I'm taking now, like a ton every day, that's all paid for. So I feel like, wow, I'm really lucky in that area.
Yeah.
Plus my heart surgery, like every day these doctors would come in. It's like, so how's it going? It's like, I'm great. I'm
So
fantastic. I
you
feel,
had the the heart transplant, or
no, I did not. I just went for well, first what they do anyway is to give you the defibrillator and the pacemaker
yeah, based.
and then see how things go or improve. And then we evaluate every year.
Mm,
So the last time I went in, they said, you're doing so well. Like, I mean, first year, I was really weak.
mm,
I was like sleeping half of the day from like 2 p.m., 3 p.m. until like 8 p.m. I would just sleep. And then whatever little is left in the day. And so in the morning, I would do work like, to get paid. But that was a really sort of, I thought in my brain, like, I was hoping that it would get better, but it isn't. And I feel like my life is kind of over. Like, is this it? Like, am I just going to be in bed for like half my life
mm,
from here on? And that's not something I like because I'm creative, I'm active, I have ideas, I want to get stuff done. That's just my nature.
mm,
But then I had back surgery and that sort of gave me back all my energy. I don't know what, but I had back surgery, which is something that's been plaguing me for a long time, but was
mm,
never diagnosed correctly. And so I had that. And as if by some weird combination, or I don't know how, but all of a sudden I had so much energy.
yeah.
Like it's 10 o'clock over where I am and I'm full of energy. And like a half a year ago, that would not be the case.
No.
And I'm sure you can relate in many ways, like feeling, you know, but, you know,
What kind of signs and what changed after in your
well,
perception?
yeah. Well, I have this very spiritual belief, right? So that's what I practice. Like I may not look or live like a monk, but in my heart, in my soul, like that's how I identify
Mm,
to whatever extent I'm able to live that sort of life, or at least the principles and the values, right? Because
mm,
that's what it's about, not so much the dress and
yeah.
so I was like, okay, I surrender my life in the hands of my teacher, in the hands of God.
Mm,
I'm fully surrendered. Like I have no power. Like what can I do? But God can do anything.
mm-hmm,
That is like he can make the impossible possible and vice versa, right? So I just surrender to that. That is my complete belief.
mm,
That's not just theoretical knowledge. That's real knowledge. Here I have a chance to practice this, to put it in real practice instead of just a theoretical slogan
mm,
like, oh, surrender, give your life to God. But no, really, here's an opportunity. I have nothing to fear. Honestly, that's how I felt. Like I have nothing to fear. Look, I'm in really good hands. By the
mm,
way, it's also COVID, right? So it's also something that you experienced, like having this crisis,
mm,
and then COVID already there looming over.
yeah.
So I was like, I hope no one's going to give me COVID here, like doctors in the hospital. I mean, you know. So, but I have to say, like the service and everything was like top notch, like the best in the world
Mm.
that I could have possibly. And it's not necessarily the nurse or like, I
It's
mean,
just
all
all
of them,
experience.
yes.
Yeah.
But I also felt like the doctor or the nurse would walk into my room. I had like a private room. I mean, gosh. And I felt like, and they were saying like, what's happening here? Like, it feels like it's floating here. Like, cause I was meditating and I was doing, on my beats. I have them here with me, like all the time. I always like pray on my
I
beats.
have beats too, by the way. They're far
Yeah.
away, but I will show you
Yeah.
after that.
Make sure they never fast. The
Mm,
beats should never fast.
mhm,
You always have, like, they're like little diamonds and just have to polish them like that,
yeah, yeah.
We polish the diamonds. So always polishing my diamonds, my gems, right? My treasure.
Mm,
And I was listening to my teacher like speak or like beautiful things like spirituality. I was just like there, like what else is there so important in life? Like I can't really do much from this little room that I'm in. And I don't want to be just, sleeping or consuming like nonsense media
mm,
the whole time. It's good to watch the news, but like, how you get bombarded with this nonstop 24/7. Like, so I
yeah.
was like just in my own little bubble, like literally, but also like spiritually.
Mm,
And some people would comment on that, and I would be so blissful. And the
mm,
doctors would come in like, "Are you okay?" It's like, "I'm fine." I'm very happy. Like, it's like I don't know why I'm so happy and so content, and so like I have full trust in you guys.
Mm.
it's my job to just cooperate and surrender to the powers that be, right? Like, I mean,
Mm.
if I must live, I live. There's like, if you know, if you're meant to die, no one can save you, and if you're meant to be saved by God, then who can kill you, right? So
Yeah.
that's my belief. Like, that is what I firmly believe,
Yeah.
and that got me through. And it was a very good experience. Like, I went home, and it was took a long time to adjust. And I had my vegetable garden, back then it was COVID. Like, everybody was making sourdough bread and
You
tomato
were
soup.
making veggies and you're
Yeah.
growing veggies. I
That
love
was good
this.
life.
Yeah.
Big yard, big garden, big mountains, like horses, next to a neighbor. And
Ah,
it was a
I
beautiful,
feel like
beautiful.
visiting you guys when you
Yeah.
talk about this. Invite me, please, when I can.
Yeah. You are invited.
Thank you.
I'm sure
Um,
Brett would love that.
I want to
Absolutely.
invite Brett to my podcast and
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
things, especially
Yeah.
autoimmune
She has a
diseases.
very interesting story too. I can tell you that
Yeah,
with her.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
when you say surrender to God, I don't know if people always say Islam is peace, but the word Islam means
Yeah.
surrender
Yeah.
to the higher power, God,
Mhm.
right? And I can relate to every single word. When I remember the moment I was told it's kidney failure for sure, and well, everything is paid. We're in Canada. Healthcare is good. I didn't have to worry about money a lot, and which I didn't have it. I was just graduating from
Mhm.
university, so I just cried because I couldn't do my honors. I don't know
Uh,
why was that important at the moment, but as I went into dialysis and the transplant itself, I remember just being at ease,
mhm.
not worrying. It's what you say, is surrender, right? It's a moment in your life when you realize, you know what, I have no control over nothing. And this has been the reality all the time. Mind you, I'm a control freak, right? So it that realization was so relieving. It was like as if you were carrying the world over your shoulder,
Mm,
and you realize you were not supposed to do that.
mm.
And that's okay. Let it go.
But
Right?
that's what brings it back to the word freedom for me. To
Yes.
be free of that burden
Yes.
also.
To be free of that burden, you need to go to the journey. You need to travel
Yeah.
the whole journey
Yeah.
to look back and look. I mean,
Mm,
you will have these moments and signs, and that those epiphany moments in your life. Because I'm such a visual person. Um, every time I have a moment, I feel like there are lights around me. I'm sure there are no
mm,
lights, and I'm not hallucinating. It's just my visual being too visual.
mm.
um, but it's just the freedom of knowing you cannot
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
and letting go. And I can tell you, and it's something I remember son said, people who are sick don't want to share their sickness
Mm,
because they don't want people to like respond in a certain way. And I can
mm,
attest to that because I don't like being judged not judged, but I don't like people telling me how I feel about things. It's a pet peeve for something going through.
mm,
So when I was sick, and doing the dialysis and everything, I didn't talk about it to everyone. It just either I met someone new that I know I'm not gonna meet again, or someone
mm,
that I trust. They won't pity
mm.
me, right? Because I was very young. I was like 28, and people are like, "Oh, poor thing at this young age," right?
Yeah.
And you know why? It wasn't because I didn't want them to know, or like I wasn't carrying shame or anything. It was
Mm,
it was because of how serene I felt
mm,
inside, that I felt like people were disturbing this
mm.
by and because I'm an empath person, I feel the other person feelings. it
Sure. Yeah.
it, it just it ruins like, I don't watch soccer because I saw a Germany soccer. It was probably, if you're a soccer fan, you remember this match. I don't remember. It was in the 90s. It was between Germany and Brazil or something, and I think Brazil won. I have like
Hmm.
faint memory because I always cheer for Brazil, and I saw the goalie cry, right? And when I saw him cry, I cried, even though I
Of
was cheering.
course, yeah,
I was cheering, and I was like, why someone has to lose?
yeah,
I didn't like it. So I stopped
yeah,
watching sport, and I don't
yeah.
watch news anymore because I just feel like, I don't know, I don't watch news.
Sure.
So, being an empath and all of that, I just kept everything to myself because I truly lived the whole experience in a
Mm-mm.
good way.
Hmm.
And what you said, that if I die, if God says this girl's gonna die, it's gonna die. She's gonna die. Nothing is gonna, me worrying about it at that time. I think I'm worried about death now more after I recovered.
Yeah. Now I was gonna say, like the feeling of freedom when you're surrendering, like in that moment, is definitely liberating.
Yeah.
But then I felt like the moment, like, because you know that there are certain steps, and you're just going through like step one and then two, and then
Mm,
at some point you're discharged, and then you are trying to sort of live your normal life again, or somehow go back or whatever.
mm,
But that is the hard part, because that's when I felt not so free,
yeah.
actually. When I was so tired and restricted in what I was able to do or not do, mostly not do. That like took my mind a little bit like in a different place where I was not happy.
Mm,
And I was like, this is so not like me, because I really value freedom. And here I
mm,
am, like, I have to be in bed. I gotta have my monitor. I need to take my pills twice a day. Like all these things that I was starting to interpret, like, oh wow, I'm now I'm being like chained
mm.
to the bed,
I was
chained to
gonna
the
say
house.
that. Yeah, I was gonna say you feel, you know, it's also expectations when you are
Mm,
there and you're in that serene moment. You feel, you think after you're done, you're just gonna go free and, I don't know,
mm,
conquer the world or something. But what happened is your body actually went through trauma,
mm-hmm.
even though you were in a good spirit, right?
Yeah.
And your body needs to rest. That's the physical body, and it has to
Mm,
rest. And that's what I went through too. Like, I was sleeping and everything, and I didn't want to go back to work. I wasn't actually working, but all those things. And I was telling myself, oh gosh, I thought I'll just go back running and lose weight and do this and do that. I was thinking about all those things, but they don't happen right away. So if you're
yeah.
in recovery, it's called recovery for a reason,
Yeah. No
right?
doubt. Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
this is amazing. I have two last questions, and they're quick questions. um
I'll
I
try to make the
promise.
answer quick too.
I promise. We're here for 2 hours, but I love it. I could go for 4 hours, but it's getting quite late here in where we are. So,
Yeah.
what do you think a theme, and I am not gonna call it a film, your special show of 6 episodes or 8 or 10?
Oh, okay. Wow.
What do you think a theme that you're carrying? Because there's the plot, but I always notice in everything I read or watch, behind like between the lines, behind the plot theme, that the writers are like, it is there, just need to look deeper. What's
I
yours?
like that question. I like that question. I think I can tell you that from if you look at it like a show or a series, and if you look at
Mm-hmm.
theme or themes,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely the theme of learning and growing, or like trying to understand life, the world, like human connections, like that is a theme that I feel
Mm-hmm.
like has always like driven me, to want to learn. Like
Mm-hmm.
even now I'm learning, right? I'm like in some sort of course, I'm doing, I want to teach as well. And so the learning or development of human kind, of us as humans, that's a very big theme, but also with a very strong spiritual dimension, right? to me, they're
Mm,
not different. Like human and spiritual is the same thing, but it's also
mm,
like trying to find sort of the heart center, like to try to live from the heart, to try to live like in a virtuous way. Not that I am the
mm,
embodiment of that, but it's an
mm,
aspirational sort of, it's an altar of my life. That is my
mm,
heart, where I have things that I aspire to be, or to, embrace or embody certain values that I'm practicing that. I'm trying.
mm,
That's my practice. That's what I try to do. And the heart being like this, the center of all virtues, right? So a theme is really to try and connect with that, to try and
mm,
find that in the human connections and the experiences of life, to find the humanness, to find the
mm,
heart connection. And somehow what I've learned is like the loving thoughts, or the loving exchange, or the, transforms everything into a loving experience, or a fulfilling experience. And it's not easy, and it's very challenging at times, and not every situation is really suitable or ideal for that. But it's an aspirational thing that I strive for, that I am sort of pulled towards. Like that is
mm,
kind of the sort of dot on the horizon that helps me as a North Star to
mm,
organize. It's an organizing theme, to
mm,
organize my life, my activities, my whatever, in that direction of trying to have like loving kindness, loving thoughts, loving exchanges. And
mm.
there's learning involved in that. And so these are the themes of like growing in spiritual emancipation, or some sort of like spiritual freedom, like
Yeah.
liberation, like, and because, the innocence,
Mm,
the innocence in my view, or at least my understanding, of my study, or whatever I read or consume, like, and what I understand out of that is like the innocence is free from the future or the past, right? It's just here right now, and it's not jaded
mm,
by things from the past, or colored or tainted. And it's also not in anxiety or worried or in control, trying to
mm.
like the future. It is just really just here, being truly here with this experience, and trying to experience the full experience without all of these things, which is not easy. And it's also not something that, oh yeah, let's adopt that sort of
Mm,
thing. It has to feel like effortless. So that is something that I'm trying to understand and embody, and to the presence. Because when you aren't present, and you are laying down, and you can't move, or you are just recovering, your mind goes like, oh, my future, or the things, or like I'm trying, like it is not present. It's worried, or
yes.
it's like trying to, go back to like that old life, or the normal life. And,
Mm,
and that's when I personally become sad or anxious, or because I feel like I don't have control over that. Like it was easy in the hospital to surrender, because I know the doctors, and I also know that one day I'll be discharged.
yeah.
But here I am. I don't know when I'll be discharged from this like sick bed.
Mm,
But I was lucky that did come along, luckily,
mm.
and that things are
I'm
very
glad it
different, and
did.
I feel more free now than, let's say, a year ago.
When you were talking, I imagined you as water.
Oh, okay, nice. I am more of a fire sign.
I'm a
I
fire
don't know
sign
what.
too. But
Yeah,
the way you flow reminds me
yeah,
of water.
yeah. Good. Yeah, no, I like that. Thank you. I
You're
take that.
welcome. You're
To me,
welcome.
water stands for like relationships, and like you know, like human kindness in relationships, and
Mm.
a lot of
Water
people
is
use.
life.
Yeah, what is life? Yeah,
Water is life. I love water. I drink like I love water. So that's
yeah,
why
yeah, I love
you
water
just
too.
reminded the flow of everything you're
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
the flow of your life. Just remind me of a water flow.
No, thank
You
you.
know, um,
Nice.
I have so much to say, but since we're approaching 2 hours, I'll ask my next question. Um, what would you call your series or your show?
What
A
would I
name?
call it?
Mm,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, if you would have asked me like a year and a half or so ago, I would have said a change of heart,
mm,
because I was going to go for heart transplant, but that doesn't seem to be happening right now. Like
mm,
luckily, so I'm not lamenting on that. Um, but there's definitely a, yeah. Well, you're putting me on the spot a little bit. I'd love to think about that, and I also can, or would love to come up with something like the story of my life. Right? It's really
mm,
about uh something divine, something to do with devotion.
Mm.
A surge. Right? There's definitely a surge and a longing in me.
How about the learner?
The learner, yeah, that's good. I love that. That's a good one. You know what? I'm a
I
pretty good student. I got so many notebooks. Like, like I always was a pretty good student in my
but
schools.
I see you said this is the theme, learning, and I see you, and I love this about you. I have to say because it's one of the things that not everyone has. And from everything I love so far in life, I know you
Mhm.
have more experience, but I've noticed that people like to think that they know everything.
Mhm.
And I noticed that I tell you one thing my mom always is annoyed about me. She asks me something, I say I don't know because I truly don't know. And she gets angry. She's like, "Why don't you know?" And I'm like, "Because the question you asked me, I don't have the answer to." And I'm just that honest. And once when you said vodka earlier and I couldn't hear it well, I said I
I
don't know
am.
what vodka is, right? Even though
Yeah.
I'm in a podcast, I could have just let it go. I love knowing things from people. If I don't know a word in English, I'd rather ask the person
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
was saying
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
I love learning, and not everyone like
Hmm.
that. Some people go by moments that are so important, and they're like a lesson, there's a learning opportunity, and they
Yeah.
miss it.
I love it.
So
I love
not many people are learners, and you being a learner is a blessing. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I see this in you, and I love it. And
Oh, thank you. I
you
love that.
know,
I embrace that. I accept that. I see it as a compliment too, and it's actually quite accurate. I think your observation has been very sharp,
mm,
and there's so many things I could say in return to like sort of justify that, label. But yeah, that title, I love that. I would totally be very happy with that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank
just
you.
you yourself. I don't know if you're aware of yourself, but like because you're a learner, you're approachable, and I could have this talk with you. And
Thank you. Thank you.
this is amazing for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed this, and I felt it was also very flowy.
Thank you.
Like you said earlier, but I think that's also because your openness and your hungriness for like learning and wanting
Thank you.
to discover about people, humans, and their stories, which are all unique, and they
Yes.
also trigger like stories in ourselves, right? Like
Yes.
I hear you say something, I go like, oh my god, I have a story like that.
Yeah, and I think we could be talking for 5, 6 hours, and I feel bad for the 2 hours now. Um,
Yeah, I
but
guess, but that's a good sign, I feel.
it is. It's a good sign. Maybe one day we'll meet in person and have this nice talk about everything. But I want
Yeah.
to thank you and
Thank
for being honest and opening your heart and sharing so much knowledge.
you.
Probably 80% of the things you said I wouldn't have known or like come
Um,
across. I don't know if I'll come across in life, but so far I did not. Right? India is not what is not. I met a lot of Indians, but it's not one of the countries I have
yeah,
visited. I wish to. But
yeah.
thank you so much, and I enjoyed this so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much.
The knowledge you carry is it's admirable.
Oh, you're
I
too kind. Yeah, well, all I can say was thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure, and also the way that you structured the interview questions, or it helps me to think of my life in a very different perspective that I usually don't do, and it helped me. Like I learned a lot about myself in that sense. So that I'm very grateful for that experience. Thank you. It's been
thank you.
great.
Sorry, that was my
Yeah.
alarm. So thank you so much. Thank you for people who are watching the Lemon Narrative podcast with Sabreen. Thank you, Rob. I know we're carrying this conversation somewhere else. We're not done.
Thank you.
Maybe
Thank you.
in a couple of years you'll be here again to tell us more. But thank
Oh my
you.
God. Thank you. Take care.